Bernard Tobin here at the Innovative Farmers Association of Ontario Conference, joined now by Russell Hedrick from North Carolina. And Russell just talked about a farmer's perspective on the dollars and cents of soil health. Russell, hey, thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, having a good time. It's really about trying to make money in agriculture, and I think the last statistic that came out from the USDA, the farmer is only receiving 11 cents out of every dollar now. And we've got to find a way for farmers to be able to make more income to really make the farm sustainable again to where it'll be there for the next generation.
Yeah. Now, you've been working really a short period of time on this. You're a first-generation farmer, got started in 2012, now over 800 acres. Talk about, I guess, that journey. It's a pretty short one, but you've come a long way.
Yeah, we, starting with 30 acres kind of allowed us to learn the way that we wanted to farm. The practices that we were learning about were, kind of new at the time. They'd been around for a long time, but technology's kind of catching up. And, every year we're able to add new farms either by, if we're lucky enough to be able to afford some, to buy them, or either we find other farms that farmers are really giving up and moving away either because of disease or pest issues, or even resistant weeds are starting to become pretty prevalent.
No, you're really regenerating a lot of the properties you're picking up. Talk about some of the practices. Talked about cover crops. Obviously, you've got a lot of beat up soils that you're really sort of bringing back to life.
So the big thing is reducing tillage. And coming and talking at these conferences, I understand some farmers till for their crop. We just really try to focus on intensity and frequency. Don't till as much as you may be used to, and then also the types of tools we're using, the intensity. But us integrating, we're never till. And a lot of people say no till, we're never till. And we have the same problems farmers have in a wet fall. We may get ruts and we have to fix those, but we never do full depth or full width tillage. And by reducing tillage, integrating cover crops, and bringing animals back to the farm, that's been really key for us to see farm ground get turned around, is bringing that animal back and having that herd impact. Holistic Management's one of the first books I actually read on cattle integration. And, by doing that, the ground has changed in 3 to 5 years to something that may have taken us, 10, 15 years in a standard no-till system.
Yeah. Talk about some of those cover crops, Russell. Obviously, you talked about a home run mix. Yeah. I'd like to talk a little bit about that, and talk about you're planting corn into rye with a termination date. I believe you said May 8th or 9th. I mean, that's pretty late.
Yeah, as far as the cover mix goes, we like rye, triticale, and oats. We like all three small grains, and the reason is they all have different carbon to nitrogen ratios, so they're going to break down at different times in the season, which is really a spoon-feeding that crop nutrients. Another thing is putting legumes in the mix to balance the carbon to nitrogen ratio so that we're not tying nutrients up just with a small grain. And then, it's kind of crazy. Everybody in my neck of the woods wants to plant corn, March the 23rd. It's a tropical crop. It needs to be, warm, growing degree temperatures. So what we did is we actually shortened up the day variety on our corn. Instead of planting 118, 120 day, we're planting 105 typically. And, we're planting beans before corn now. We're seeing better bean yields by putting beans in the ground in April and corn in May. And corn really needs that extra moisture, and it really benefits from those growing degree units. And those are some of the changes we've made on our operation without sacrificing yield, and actually seeing a better yield come from it just because of those management practices. It's different everywhere, and I would say up here in Canada, it's cold. I've been cold from the day I got up here. It's not like home. But, the thing I'll say is maybe what I'm doing is not going to be directly put here on another farm, but they can look at what we're doing and modify it. Yeah. All those 5 principles of soil health still apply in Canada just like they do in North Carolina.
Talk about crimping and planting. You got an interesting setup on your planter, your corn planter. You get 95% kill termination in front of that crop going into the ground. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, so, our problem is we used to have to spray, and then we would roll. And if we put our chemical out and rolled and it rained, or a piece on the planter broke or tractor broke, it may be a week or two before we got it planted, and we're losing that time and that residual herbicide. So we started looking at green planting. And, we used to green plant and then come back and roll, but it was too many passes. So, yeah, we saw a Yetter stalk devastator at a farm show, and essentially just mounted it to the front bar of the planter, and we're using it to crimp and roll in one pass. There's a loaded spring on there where we can actually apply more down pressure, but we're typically seeing 90 to 95% termination of the cover crop just with that crimping action on the stalk devastator.
I want to talk about cover crops again. You talked about infiltration. Those roots are really helping, water, moisture get down through the soil. And it's also interesting as well, you talked about your nutrient profile in the soil. You've discovered you got a lot of nutrients down there, and, your approach with cover crops is really helping your corn roots access it.
So when I first started farming, I went around every other farmer I could find that would talk to me, and I said, what do I need to be a farmer? And they said, first thing you need is a 150 horsepower tractor and a 20-foot disc, because in no-till, you get nutrient stratification where the nutrients all stay on the top of the ground. Well, we found out that's not true on our farm. Every year that we do no-till and cover crops, and this is across the world, Dr. Caligari down in Brazil, our farm, friends of mine even out in Kansas, Nebraska, in the Dakotas, somebody like Gabe Brown, we're seeing almost an inch of aggregation built per year. So like Dr. Caligari in Brazil, he's got over 3 feet of aggregation. I've got some farms that are close to 6 to 7 inches. As we see infiltration rates increase, it's because that aggregation, it's that soil aggregation building that pore space that water can infiltrate. It's almost like a sponge is what it looks like. And as we increase aggregation, we also see nutrients move in the profile. And seeing those nutrients move deeper in the profile is great, because in the summertime when the ground gets dry in the top inch or two, I've got nutrients deeper where I've got available moisture for those plants to use. And, just looking at that, and you talked about water infiltration, our typical water infiltration rates on no-till or conventional till are 1/4 to 1/2 inch an hour. We're seeing farms now that are 7 or 8 inches an hour. We don't get those long soaking rains like we used to back in the day. You get 5 or 10 inches in an hour or two, and you don't get rain for another month. And we've got to get that water in the profile.
A couple of other things interesting, and you had some questions on as well. A new technique, you talked about utilizing sugars to control pests in soybeans. Tell us about, again, what you're applying, how you're applying it, and the impact.
So I got to really say, first of all, there's a gentleman named Will Mann in North Carolina, and then Dr. Jonathan Lundgren. Those are the two people that really influenced us in trying it. But instead of spraying an insecticide, which is non-selective and kills the predator pest plus our beneficials, which we're trying to keep, utilizing sugar, when we spray that sugar on the plant and the Brix level increases above 14, 15, when that predator insect comes in and bites that plant, it can't process those complex sugars and it bloats them. And the way that Jonathan Lundgren described it to me is bugs don't have a pancreas, they can't deal with sugar. And so when that pest actually bites that plant, it'll actually pester them to the point where they fly off to somebody else's. And for us, we're spending 50 cents to $1.50 an acre on sugar, getting rid of the insects that we don't want while able to increase our beneficial population that we're trying to get back in with some pollinator strips and other things like that. And, for farmers, we're doing a 1/2 gallon in furrow when we're planting and a 1/2 pound to maybe a pound over the top with the sprayer. And it's been really beneficial for us. And, just be careful when you go buy a pallet of sugar. They're going to want your ID because they probably think you're heading to the woods with it. So...
Hey, just to wrap it up, you wrapped up your presentation with the sentiment, the thought that, hey, you're farming for profit, not for yield. And you talked a number about $91,000 in saving in inputs on a year. Break that down for us and give us sort of a sense of, again, what you're saving. You're giving up some yield, but you're making some money.
So what we started looking at is profitability. And, Gabe Brown made the comment of you want to sign the back of the check and not the front. And so when we start looking at farming for profit, not for yield, by us integrating cover crops into our system, just on our weed suppression alone, we cut out our post-spray on our farm. And by doing that, we saved about $20,000 just in chemical. That wouldn't even have been what the application cost would have been to apply that chemical. That's just strictly chemical. And then we started working with Dr. Rick Haney. Ray Archuleta told me about Rick's test years and years ago, and we implemented it on the farm at 25% increments. And what Rick does is Rick uses an extractant that mimics root exudates and water versus a conventional test uses a caustic acid like hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid. And Rick's test really gives us biological indicators with CO2 burst, organic carbon, organic nitrogen. And by utilizing his test, we were able to cut back on phosphorus, nitrogen, and potassium alone of about $71,000. So putting, the chemical savings plus our, fertilizer savings just on those 3 inputs, we saved $91,000 on the farm last year. And there's other guys who are farming way more acres than us, like Derek Axton, he's in Canada. You've got guys like Adam Chappell down in Arkansas. That's a pretty huge divide between the 3 of us. And all of us are seeing the same results with those tests, and it's making farmers profitable again.
Yeah. Now you're giving up some yield, but you're in the black.
Yeah, the thing of it is I hate to sound like a lazy farmer, but I haul a little bit less grain. Sometimes we have to dry a little bit less. We have to store a little bit less. It's less wear and tear on my equipment. But at the end of the day, by the acre, we're making more money. And I can sit at home for free if I'm going to farm and put in the hours and work hard. I want to see the return for it.
Russell, hey, thank you for stopping by here. I know you got another presentation to do. Great crowd here today. Enjoy the day.
Yeah, it's good having you. Thank you.